Welcome to the Nurture Network podcast, where motherhood meets transformation. I'm Jess Baldenhofer, certified parent coach, educator, and mom on a mission to help you move beyond overwhelm and create a deeper connection with your kids and yourself. Each episode is packed with real tools, relatable stories, and the support you deserve. Let's dive in and take another step toward the peaceful, fulfilling parenting journey you've been searching for. Hi, welcome back to the Nurture Network. I'm so excited to have my friend Lauraine Mann here with me today. Lauraine is a psychosomatic practitioner and my friend, and she's a super empathetic, intuitive powerhouse. And I'm so excited to have her here because over the course of our friendship, we have learned that there are so many wise words and tools and ideas that Lauraine has that can support moms and the moms that I work with. So I'm so excited today to have her here with us to hear her words of wisdom and have her share with all of you the ways that somatic practices can support parents and children. So welcome, Lauraine.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit, let's just start off the bat telling us what does somatic mean? Define it for us. What does this word mean? Because we're starting to hear it more and more. And I think some people are a little confused about what it means or hear it and have no idea what it means. So if you could just start by telling us a little bit about what it means.
In its most simplest form, it means body. So somatics is all about the body. And I define it in the way of we have our heads and our brains and our minds. And then the connection to the body starts with our necks, our throats, our shoulders. And 80% of who we are-ish lives in our body. And we grow up, well, I'm going out of the context of defining somatics, but somatics to me means body, everything body oriented.
Yeah. And it's funny that you started to go into the way we grow up, because that's exactly why we're here, right? We're here to talk about not only how, as women, as moms, we were raised, and so many of us are very much removed from the experience in our bodies. And we're also here to talk about what it's like to be a child somatically and be in your body as a child. So we're definitely going to get into all of that. And before we do get into all of that, can you just tell us a little bit about how you came to this work and what brought you to wanting to do this work with clients?
I've always wanted to work in psychology. That's the one thing I've known, this expectation of going to university and what do I want to study? The only thing I ever wanted to study was psychology. And so doing an undergrad and then a master's in psychology, and then just being fascinated with people, and then working in organizations and helping CEOs and managers and directors try and help their employees through a variety of different methods and modalities, all in relation to health and well-being. I was noticing that I wasn't really making the difference that I wanted to make. And at the same time, I was going through my own healing process and started working with a therapist in London, and she was very body-oriented. And that's exactly what I needed, because working with her, I could really see how disconnected I was to my body and living in this world really primarily through my mind and being dissociated or not feeling the feelings that I was really desiring to feel and have for myself. And so really through my own working with myself and really understanding how much I need this body, and actually how much I want this body, and how much my body desires and longs to be held and felt and spoken with and spoken to. And then also really seeing that I wasn't making the difference working with top CEOs and managers and directors of large organizations. It was kind of like an amalgamation of the both of, okay, this really works for me. If this works for me, it's going to help other people. And I really wanted to work bottom up. So really helping everyday individuals. And so it was a mixture for me. Yeah, really wanting to make a difference with people's lives rather than trying to work with a system that wasn't always in service to employees.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so it's interesting that you got involved or interested in psychology first, because traditional psychology and traditional therapy is so mental, it's so mind based. And so it's fascinating to me your path, like sort of from that interest into the work of somatics and the body, and how they really honestly can be paired together to, or they need to, because that's how our body functions. And it's so interesting to learn more and more how our body really informs our brain in a lot of ways, when we always traditionally thought that it was the other way around.
Yeah. And I think the brain has a really important place in what the body does. So if you're thinking of something, how does the body react? If you're feeling something, what does the mind tell you about what you're feeling? And so there is this figure of 8 kind of diagram that you can use if you want. It's like it works together, and the mind is such a great place to start, because even in the work that I do, there's talking, right? There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of understanding of what's going on, why it's happening, where it all came from, and then we can bring the body in. And it can work vice versa. So if someone comes in super anxious, we can be with the anxiety, and there can be less words because we're curious about the anxiety, for example. Where does it live? How does it move? What story do you have around the anxiety? But if we give ourselves permission to drop down into our bodies, then there's so much more information available to us.
I love that. So let's kind of start at the beginning, because, we're speaking to moms on this podcast, but most moms listening to this podcast have children, and also we were all children at some point. So can we just talk a little bit about what somatics kind of looks like in childhood, and how children are seemingly like living through the world in a present, in a sensory, in a somatic way? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a little complex because, we're born as babies. A lot of the time, the baby is the one that gets to decide when it's ready to come out. And it knows when it needs to sleep. It knows when it needs food, knows when it needs its diaper changed. And so there is such a connection already to needs as a baby. And that's all the baby is in. There's nothing else. And if you look at a child in a playground, or with kids that you have, you can see how present they are and how in the moment they are. And it's such a gift, because it's like that's all that exists in the world, just exactly where they are, what they're doing, how they're feeling, what they need, what they long for, what they want. It's all just so present. And it's beautiful. Like if you watch them just in their own world, in their own mind, playing with another kid or playing with parents, a lot of kids are just fully embodied. And so we start from that place. We start from that place of knowing what we need. And as babies, we cry. And as we begin to form language, we can begin to ask for what we need. And then through conditioning, whether it's through culture, society, whatever system you happen to live in, we're conditioned to come out of these feelings that we have. We're conditioned to change how we ask for something or what we need. We're conditioned to, do we even have needs? Because it can be a lot. Children's feelings, children's emotions, being in the moment can be so much for adults around them. And it takes the children out of their bodies and more in their minds, because then we're programmed to survive. So if someone around them is saying, "Oh, you're screaming, you're too loud, quiet down," if that happens enough, the child learns, "Oh, it's not okay to have my big energy."
Mm-hmm.
And then the child will learn to be more quiet. But then what happens to their big energy?
Yeah. And
They're
that's so
changing.
interesting because when we were children, I think most of us would say we grew up with like kind of a lot of sort of controlling of those emotions and those experiences. And I think parents today are so conscious of allowing their children to have big feelings, allowing their
Mhm.
children to feel seen in their feelings. But I think parents are still pretty overwhelmed, and understandably so, by watching our children have these big feelings or even just having the time for them, right? Like if your toddler is really feeling their feelings and kind of throwing their body on the floor in the middle of the store, and like on the one hand, we can sit back and we can say, that child is somatically connected and knows sort of like how to process this feeling through their bodies. But as parents, like, we don't have time for this, or it's triggering us, or we don't have the support we need to support our child in these feelings. So, as you're saying, over time in these societies, children can learn pretty quickly, but we have this weird dichotomy these days of wanting to allow these feelings and knowing the importance of that as parents, but also
Mhm.
feeling more pressure than ever.
Mm. Really interesting about it's such a dichotomy, isn't it? Wanting to support and be with and hold our children. And then also like, I don't know how, or what are other people going to think, or how do I juggle all of this, or I wasn't expecting it. And then the triggers, exactly what you said, the triggers of if this child is having such huge emotions, I imagine some of the triggers to the parents, to the mum, is, oh, I was never allowed that. I don't even know what to deal with it. I don't even know how to deal with it because that's something that I wasn't even allowed to have. How do I let my child have it when I wasn't taught that I could have it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting because ideally we want to kind of learn from our children and how they are naturally somatic and naturally
Mm-hmm.
connected with their bodies. But in a lot of ways, we don't have the tools or the time to really support those kinds of experiences. So,
Yeah.
can you talk to me a little bit about like what happens in an adult's nervous system when they are, you know, I guess during parenting in general, when they're around children who are maybe having big feelings, or just even other people in your space, when you're like an empathetic person as a parent and you have people um, having big feelings or dysregulated in front of you, what kind of happens to the mom's nervous system in those situations?
Totally depends on the mum and how the mum was brought up and what was allowed and not allowed and okay and not okay. It depends how much work they've done on themselves as well, you know, because just because you were taught something growing up doesn't mean that's something that you need to then continue doing moving forward. But primarily, if a mum can hold that energy, then it's great. The mom will allow the child to have their temper tantrum, for example. There's like, I think I've spoken to you about this before, but it's in my mind a lot since talking with you today. So I'm just going to name it. For a long time ago, I don't know if it was an Instagram thing or a TikTok thing, doesn't matter. But I saw this, it was this video of this kid having a temper tantrum in the grocery store.
Mm.
And instead of the mom telling the kid to be quiet or how dare you, what do you think you're doing, she got on the floor and had a temper tantrum with the kid.
Mhm.
And the kid quieted down. It was like there was this mirroring, there was this acceptance. In my perspective, that's how I saw it.
Mhm.
There's other perspectives and schools of thought of how much it shocked the kid, and therefore the kid knows not to do it. Like, who knows? But in my perspective, it was just like, oh, the kid is being mirrored here, and the kid's having a temper tantrum to be noticed. So the mom is having a temper tantrum with the kid. I mean, there's so many different things you can look at it in that way. But on other occasions, parents can or mums can go into freeze. They can go into their fight and flight of, oh my God, we have to stop this. There can be so many feelings going on in the body that if there's a flooding of feelings, then our bodies naturally, either depending on how we've been brought up, can go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So it really depends on how the mum was brought up and probably the environment, right? If a kid is having a temper tantrum at home compared to somewhere in public, the response from the mum might be very different. But it can be really easy to go back into old patterns and feelings and thoughts that don't necessarily serve the situation, but served that human being at some point in their life.
Yeah, I really like your story about the child having the temper tantrum and then the mom got down with them and did it too, and almost like created, by doing that, created space for these big feelings. And I think really one of the main issues for childhood and for mothers is the fact that we don't fully process these feelings. So part of why we do somatic work, and I think you would agree, is because what happens is we don't process our feelings, and then those unprocessed emotions get sort of locked away in our body and wind up sometimes coming out with like illness and things like that. But sometimes it's just about burnout and stress and cortisol levels and things that are sort of not as easy to see, but they are, or even anger. It could be like I'm a mom and I'm angry every day and I don't know why. And that's often a sign that like there are a lot of unprocessed feelings that went on. And I actually saw this movie once where somebody was grieving. This woman, a grown woman, was grieving and she was crying. And this whole group of women kind of came around her and held her and they all wailed with her. And it's this beautiful thing, but it's like not something that's really that accepted in our society. But one of the things we always learned about in education, like when we were learning about child development, is when a feeling comes up for a child slash a person, it's a little train that has to go all the way through the tunnel and it has to come out on the other side of the tunnel. So for a 3-year-old, that might look like a 2 to 3 minute tantrum, but like if you allow it to happen, the train comes out the other side of the tunnel. If you don't allow it to happen, if you cut it short, whether it's a parent cutting it short or whether it's a child themselves because they've learned how to cut it short, that unprocessed emotion gets stored somewhere. So from your perspective, how do you think about that in terms of like unprocessed emotions and how they show up in our bodies?
I think you hit the nail on the head with how you explained that. If you allow yourself to fully cry as a kid or have a temper tantrum and you're allowed to have all of it, then you're completing a cycle. If it gets stopped, if you're being told you're too loud or don't cry or whatever it might be, and you shut down your emotion, what you're doing is you're suppressing something that your body is actually wanting to release. And so then it gets stuck and it's held in your system. And that's why somatics can be so powerful, because you're releasing the stuck energy. And when you release the stuck energy and you actually move through a full cycle, then there's more space to allow in who you really want to be and who you were before you were told that your energy's too big, or you're not allowed to cry, or you can't use your voice. You have to listen to authority figures and do everything that they say. You can begin to rewire and repattern who you are and who you want to be rather than who you were told to be. And you can see that in the wild with animals. There's something that I went to Africa and went on safari and saw it in real life when the lion ate and killed the day before. The following day we went back out on safari, and the same pride, it's a pride of lions, right? Yeah, same pride of lions were tormenting this, or one lion was tormenting this buffalo. And you could see the buffalo completely frozen, did not move, not 1 inch. And lions only kill when they're hungry. So they were just playing on the lion's perspective, right? The buffalo was fearing for its life, and so was completely and utterly frozen. As the lion left, you could see the buffalo completely shake and breathe really heavily. And then once it had finished, it literally just walked away. Even though the lions were still around, it walked away. And that's exactly what happens in our bodies. We hold And then if we're not given permission to release that holding, whether it's through crying or hitting or running or whatever it might be for you, that energy is still held in our system. And then it changes who we are. If we're allowed to move through to the end of the tunnel in the way that you were sharing, we release whatever that looks like, tears, needing to kick something. I mean, I've seen people's bodies shake all the time. They shake. Do that. The energy's released. You move to the end of the tunnel. You move through the cycle. And that energy is no longer there. You're not holding on to something that didn't serve. You've moved through it. Well, it did serve, right? You're
Right.
fighting for your life, and you freeze to do that. When you realize you don't need to do that anymore, you move that energy out and you get on with your life. You get on with your day. And unfortunately, we as humans don't always have that opportunity to do that on a regular basis.
Yeah. And what you're really making me think of too is a lot of times, for example, like children will need to process an emotion through their body. And the only way they know how, for example, is hitting, right? So they'll just hit. And oftentimes, as parents, we want to say, oh my God, my kid keeps hitting me. I need to stop this behavior. And understandably so, it can be triggering to get hit repeatedly. It can hurt. And it can make you concerned about your child that they're violent or something. But usually, it is more of a somatic or more of a sensory need that is not getting met. And so this is a perfect example of how when we see it as a sensory thing or a somatic thing, we can say, okay, what is the emotion underneath? Some kids, when they hit, are laughing and they're being silly and they think it's a game. And then some kids are really angry and some kids are just like letting something out. So when we look at the why underneath, we can start to understand, okay, how do we help this child like release this out of their bodies in a way that's safe, or release this out of their bodies in a way that's constructive, that's actually going to help them feel like they're processing whatever the feeling might be. So that's something that we as parents never really learned. I think I would speak for 90% of the people listening. Our parents did not teach us that kind of thing. So it leads me to like my next question, which is kind of a gigantic one for you, which is when you are, let's just say you're a parent, you've got young kids, you've got a job, you've got a million, the mental load of being a mother, we talk about all the time. But let's say you have like 40 years of not doing this stuff and not processing a lot of your emotions in a healthy way. And also just like not even having the time. How do you start? How would you suggest that somebody kind of start like noticing the emotions that need to be processed, and maybe even maybe this is a good time for a couple little tools that people can take away of just very basic things they can do to connect with their bodies and check in with their bodies during the day?
That is a really big question. How do you start? I mean, that's why what you do is so amazing, because you help coach and guide mums through parenting, which is incredible. And I really support what you do. It's remarkable. And yeah, I love what you do.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Well, it's amazing to have partners like you because I learned so much from you. And then, it helps in supporting clients because I'm not a therapist and it's not my job to 100% do sort of talk therapy. I help them meet their goals, but a lot of it is about moms being burnt out, moms not having these somatic tools, for example, from childhood and not really processing their emotions or learning how to at an early age. But then they're trying to teach their child to do it. So
Yeah.
before you can teach your child to do it, you really have to start taking care of yourself in these little moments. And I say before, like in a very on purpose way, because we tend to think, oh, I'll just take care of me later, or I'll take care of me in the cracks. So, how would you suggest if I'm a mom, I've got two young kids, I've never done any of this stuff before, I'm feeling really burnt out, really stressed, a lot of anxiety. What are some ways that I might like check in with my body during the day and maybe even have some tools to support myself when I'm feeling really anxious or angry or burnt out?
Yeah, it's a really great question. All your questions are great in relation to this. I think if we really bring it down to basics, before you get up in the morning, even if you've got a child crawling into your bed, right, that wakes you up, or a crying baby, giving yourself even 2 seconds, 2 breaths, really good belly breaths. Because again, as babies, if you look at babies or young children, they breathe using their belly. So as you breathe in, your belly expands, and as you breathe out, your belly contracts. And what that does is it's getting more oxygen into your system. And that helps with so many different things. I mean, breath work is, I'm no expert in breath work. I support breath work. I love it. But then as we grow up, and we have stresses in our lives, we breathe using our chest. And so we're not gaining the full impact that a decent breath can give us. And if we're breathing, we have more information about what's going on in our body. And so something so basic like, well, maybe it's not basic, actually. I'm going to take that out. Something as in taking 2 breaths in the morning before getting out of bed and doing some form of a check-in with however connected you are with your body or not. It doesn't really matter. You're just breathing. You're giving yourself permission to take 2 or 3 breaths before you get out of bed. And then you can do that before going to bed at night. So you get back into your bed at night, turn off the lights. Hopefully all the kids are sleeping. You give yourself permission to take another couple of breaths using your belly. So as you breathe in, your belly expands. As you breathe out, your belly contracts.
I love that, because so many times we think, okay, well, I'm going to get to a yoga class, or I'm going to, go get a massage, and all of those things are great if you can do them. But how many of us just breathe for like 3 deep breaths when we wake up and before we go to sleep? I mean,
Yeah.
everybody has time for that. And I can imagine it's very powerful in terms of coming into your body, connecting with your body, and just giving back to yourself in this tiny way as your day begins and ends.
Yeah. And you can do it while you're pouring yourself a glass of water. You can do it while you're sitting on the toilet. You can do it while you're shutting the door to your car. It's such a quick thing. But what you're doing on the bigger on the bigger picture, when I do it, I'm coming back to me to the best of my ability in the moment. Am I always grounded? No. Do I always know what's going on? No. I have to stop and I have to come back to myself, and I have to give myself permission to do that. So if I'm giving myself permission to do that, and my body and mind know that I'm giving myself permission to do something for me, you'll start to want that even more. And then when you want that even more, you can move to the next thing. And then when that doesn't feel like enough anymore, you can move to the next thing. But to be able to mirror a child, to be able to witness a child, to be able to hold a child and their big feelings, we kind of have to be with ourselves as well.
So that actually was going to be my next question, is when I love your first example of just, it's almost sort of preventative in a certain way of taking care of yourself, and a regular practice that you can have to be connected to your body and yourself. What do you suggest when we're in these moments with our children where things are really heated, where either the child is having big feelings, or maybe you've even gotten into this like negative loop argument with your child, or maybe your child is super angry and saying, I hate you, or throwing something. What are some suggestions that you have for like supporting yourself in a somatic way in these moments?
So good question. The first thing that comes to my mind is give yourself permission to let them. Let them have their big feelings. There's nothing you have to do. Give them permission to have them. Seriously, give yourself permission to let them have them. And just because they're having big feelings doesn't mean everything has to be figured out in that moment. You can let them have their big feelings. Maybe it's triggered you. Okay. So you give them what they need to the best of your ability, And then maybe you need to go into the bathroom or go into another room, get a pillow and scream into the pillow, or give yourself permission to take some breaths a little bit further away from your child before coming back, or making yourself a cup of tea or getting yourself water. One of the biggest things that I learned to do when I was triggered was to put my feet on the floor, move my toes, and get water. So I would stop conversations and say, hey, I'm just grabbing some water. I'll be back in a minute. Or, I mean, in therapy sessions, when I was aware that I was dissociating, I learned to get my water, look away from my therapist, drink some water and breathe and come back to me. And I think for a child, you can explain what you're doing of like, hey, yeah, I'm so glad you had your big feelings. Give me a minute. I'm going to come back to you. Or I'm right with you. I'm not going anywhere. I just need to get myself some water. And give yourself, like, it's not going to happen like that overnight. So if you're used to screaming back at your kid, it's not like you're going to change that overnight. It's a process, and it's giving yourself permission to learn something totally new, because I imagine that's not what you were given growing up. And so you're really working in a completely new place, and that's uncomfortable and it's vulnerable and it's a learning curve. It's a real learning curve.
I love what you're saying, because what it's also making me think about is that when your child is having big feelings in a moment, if you have a little practice, whether it's drinking water or just leaning, or I like how you said moving your toes or leaning your back against the wall, what you're doing too is remembering that you are not your child, that your child's big feelings are not your big feelings. And you remind your body in those moments almost helps you remember that you're separate from your child, because the moment our kids are born, we are so entangled with them and we are so connected with them, and that can be really powerful and amazing. But there can also be these times where we forget that we're separate. And in those moments, we need to, in order to stay calm, in order to allow them to have their feelings, we need to remember that they're not ours. And like you just said multiple times, which I love how you repeated it, because we all need to hear this more of just let them have their feelings. And what that also means is letting us have our own. So your child could have their big feeling about something, and then you could be having some sadness in a reaction, but you having your awareness of what your feeling is versus what theirs is, and that separation in those moments, so that you can come back as a regulated person to support them.
Exactly. I had a couple of things in my head that I wanted to name when you were sharing, and they disappeared. Something around curiosity. If you give yourself permission to get curious, oh, my child's having really big emotions, like what happened? Instead of feeling like you know what happened or trying to fix it, what if you got curious? Or like once their child has screamed or cried and you're holding them if they're crying, or you're letting them scream, or you're redirecting behavior. So if they're hitting you, you can be like, hey, don't hit mommy. That's not nice. It hurts. Here's a pillow you can hit. Let's hit the pillow. And you can do it with them. Right. I think there's this stigma that you have to, as a parent, you have to be poised and perfect and not show emotions. But this kid is showing emotions, right? They're so in tune with how they feel. What if they're teaching you something? What if they're helping you learn something too? And if your child is hitting you, as the example you were using earlier, redirect it. It's not that it has to stop. It's just that specific behavior of hitting you has to stop. But there's a pillow, or there's a bed, or there's a mattress, or there's a couch, or there's a squishy ball that they can squish if they don't want to hit or punch. And you can do it with them, and you can support them to do that, of like, yeah, get it all out on this pillow, like let's just hit and kick and scream and do whatever you need to do. Here's the pillow, you're not going to hurt anything or anyone. So it's teaching them about responsibility of, we can't hit another person. That's so much around boundaries, like physically hurting someone, all of the emotions that can come up with that. So you probably have a whole house or a whole apartment worth of things that you can hit and there's no negative impact. And so it's teaching the kid, yes, you can have all of your emotions, but we're going to have your emotions in a responsible way to the best of the kid's ability. The kid's not an adult. The kid is a kid. And so we get to teach. But yeah, like redirecting the behavior, because their body wants to hit. There's something that their body wants to get out. So let them hit, but in a very curious, hey, we're going to hit, but we're going to hit in a safe way. We're going to hit in a way that doesn't hurt you or mummy or the room. Here's a pillow.
Yeah, I really like that. And even in your example of almost sounding enthusiastic for the child to like get out their emotion in a safe way while you redirect. And then the other piece that kind of what goes back to the beginning of our conversation, which was also around like connecting the brain to the body for your children. Because when they're having these big emotions and their feelings in their body, in order for us as the adults to help them make sense of it, especially like over time, we have to be curious. Like you're saying, we have to be curious about what's going on under the surface. So even if we say, oh, you're hitting because you're so frustrated, and then helping redirect that behavior, but also helping name what the feeling is, because that is where the brain body connection comes in. If we're just focused on the somatic piece and just expressing through the body, like you said in the beginning, it's also about connecting to the brain and connecting to like understanding what it is they're feeling. And that over time supports them knowing like which tools to pull from when they're feeling certain ways.
Yeah, you're giving them a toolbox that they can use for the rest of their life. And it can actually be really fun.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm not trying to negate anything by saying this, but giving your kid permission to hit and kick and scream, if that's the culture that you come from where that's acceptable, because not every culture is, it can be fun, because you'll notice how you feel after, and you'll probably feel lighter and more connected. And you can talk about that too, like, or how do you feel now that you've hit something? What changes? And so you're getting super curious about obviously what led to that, also the fact that their body just wants them to do it, because we as adults, we might have an idea as to what we want to do, but how often do we actually let ourselves do it? And then talk about it after. And that can
Yeah.
also help close that cycle.
Yeah. And it's interesting too how we're talking about like there are these moments where our children are dysregulated and need maybe some redirecting to, like you were saying, with the hitting and using a pillow or a ball. And then there's also just getting curious about those things that help us stay regulated over time, right? Like your example of breathing in the morning and at night. What are some examples like for children that are helpful, little bodies that are regulating regular behaviors that we can kind of implement into their lives that kind of help them stay regulated? And part of this is about being curious about your own child, because every child is different, every person is different. And if you sat down as the mom and said, okay, these 5 things, if I do them every week, they help me feel regulated. You might have to do that for your child too. What helps my child have a regulated nervous system? But what are some examples that you might have off the top of your head that are good for children in terms of staying regulated?
You know what comes to mind when you ask that question? If the child is old enough and has some awareness of their surroundings and can verbally speak, ask them, because
Mm.
I bet they'll know, whether it's running around outside or jumping up and down on the bed or taking a bath. or sitting down and eating some snacks or putting their back against a wall, I bet they'll know.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
bet they'll know what they need in order to move some energy. And it might be running around in a circle, screaming and laughing, and or tickling them or running after them or have them play on your back, or it could be so many different things. Maybe doing a puzzle, reading a book, turning the lights down. I think obviously as mums, to be as attuned to your child as possible is the goal. And also let the child work with the child. Let it be some form of collaboration so that you're finding out from them what works for them. And then obviously you can help if you know that your child needs to release energy. Do you have a game that you can play with them? If it's raining outside, do you have a game that you can play in the house that will help them release that energy? If you're noticing that they're just so tired and they're nothing is working because they're crying and they're just exhausted, how about holding them in a certain position or reading them their favorite book or putting on some calming music, turning down the lights?
Yeah.
But finding out, getting curious. What does your kid think it needs?
I love that that was your answer, because one of the reasons why I just love this conversation and for moms to listen to it is because we often forget that a lot of times difficult behaviors can be seen through this lens, can be seen through sort of a nervous system, somatic or sensory lens. And that, a lot of times, for example, a lot of the clients I talk to are get really frustrated with their children at bedtime because it's when they decide that they want water. It's when they decide they want to play. But that is a moment where not some children, like you said, need the dark room and need just a light scratching on the back and a cuddle. And then some children really need to like jump up and down on the bed for 5 minutes before bedtime because it really helps them get that out. And I think this conversation is so important because if we can see ourselves and our children through this lens, it really does help us understand why children may be doing things. Like you said, they know on a certain level what it is they need, but can't necessarily verbally articulate it. And if we're looking as parents through this lens, it may really help us understand what it is they need and what their triggers are and when are those days where they didn't move their bodies enough, or when their behavior is telling us that they have a physical need of some kind.
Yeah. And a reminder, this is so easily said compared to actually it being completed or done. And I think we get to come back to ourselves. And there are days where I don't even know what I need.
Yeah.
I'm so exhausted, or something major happened, or I am full of so much energy. I don't always know what I need. And I'm not the only one. So many adults don't know what they need. And so if we struggle in that department, if we're not always aware of what we need, how to articulate things, how to move our bodies, how to move our energy, there is also this part of us that how can we expect our child to always know?
Yeah.
And so, yes, we might show all of the I don't knows in a very different way to the child. But if it's present for us, it's going to be present for them. And I think all of the tools that we learn as adults can be given and taught to children. You just might need to adapt it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the support can be me leaning into this chair and feeling my back against the chair. Maybe for a kid, it's lying fully flat on their back or on their front. Who knows? And so we can adapt all of the things that we're learning. So going back to where do you start? Yes, absolutely. I love what you said. You start with you and everything that you learn through working with you or the other help that they might be receiving or wanting, you can pass down to your kids because it's knowledge, it's wisdom. And what a beautiful gift if you're working on yourself. You're helping your kid just through working with yourself. And that can also be enough. It will have an impact. You'll see change. If you're constantly working on yourself and changing yourself, you'll see that ripple eventually in your family.
Yeah. And I love that message of working on yourself and growing. And also, what I'm struck with is some of the suggestions you've made today is just finding little ways to be kind to yourself. Like, even waking up and breathing for 3 seconds with your hand on your belly, that is like a little physical kindness that you're giving yourself. And there are so many ways to do that. Even if it's, so many moms are like, I'm running around, I don't have enough time to drink water. Like, if you can just sit in a chair and drink some water and just be kind back to you and be kind to yourself in these teeny tiny ways, somatically, that can like really make a big difference in your day and your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just pausing every now and again when you remember, or finding the example of breathing in bed is because it then becomes a routine. One of my teachers gave this example of, she always remembers to ground when she moves through the archway of a door. So she walks through the door, and that's her cue that she needs to check in on her body. And when I mean by ground, I mean bringing your energy down. So wherever your energy lives, whether it's your head or parts of your body, you're intentionally and consciously bringing that energy down into your feet and into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And just to the best of your ability. It looks different daily sometimes, but that was her cue of like, okay, I've got to remember to ground. I'm walking through a door. And so it's about finding something that will remind you to do the thing that you know helps you, whether that's when you do pour yourself a glass of water, or when you do go to the bathroom, or when you have a shower. Bed, everyone lies in bed, so choose the bed.
Yeah.
Breathe in the morning, breathe in the evening, and that's your cue. But when you sit on the bed because you're changing, you're dressing your child or whatever you're doing, that's your cue to, okay, I'm here. Where am I? What do I need? It's like your daily 2-second check-in, and then from there you can increase things.
That's so great. And I think you've given moms today so many different tools that they can use in their day-to-day life that literally we all have time for, right? This is not about having conversations about carving out like hours of your day to do certain things. These are teeny tiny little things you can do throughout the day to support yourself, your nervous system, your emotions, just coming back to yourself, coming back into your body, which is so powerful. And if a mom is listening and wants to take it further and work with you, can you just explain like how you work with clients? And I know it's different for each client, but sort of what is the process in working with a psychosomatic practitioner?
It's a collaboration. So I work with the person, their time frame, where they are, what they need. I'm really working with the person sitting in front of me and where they really are and what they need. Some sessions could be just sitting in complete silence and breathing. Other sessions could be really getting up, moving the body because there's so much anger and frustration. Other sessions could be, who knows? Every session is different. But it's what I'm trying to say. It's an opportunity to get to know yourself more. It's an opportunity to release all the things that are not working for you and having an understanding as to where they came from originally, so you can heal the original experience. And then when you have awareness, you can change. Awareness is key. And so the work I do is really connecting your mind and body together, really getting you to slow down, experience your sensations. What are the stories around the sensations? What is actually true? And releasing all that doesn't serve you, whether it's because you realize that you're yelling at your kid too much and you want to stop. Okay, well, let's figure out why you yell in a very compassionate, non-judgmental way. And then once we figure it out, we can then change that for you and really bring in who you want to be. And so that's kind of how I hold. My overall intention is to meet you where you're at. No expectation, no requirement. It's an exploration of you and who you are, with the intention of, over time, connecting you with yourself to the level that you want to be connected to yourself.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And again, for sharing all of these thoughts and ideas and tools. I think moms will really think differently about their children and about themselves, and learning how to support themselves and their children in their day-to-day lives. And I know moms today are working so hard, like I've said
Yeah.
before, to do all the things, but on top of all of the things, teach their child to understand themselves and their own needs. And it's really powerful to think about how we can do this for ourselves while we're doing it for our children at the same time. So thank you so much for joining us. I'll have all of Lauraine's links in the show notes, but thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I just want to say one more thing of if it's a learning curve, and I think there's such a gift in taking some pressure off of yourself just to the best of your ability. Every parent messes up. It's just going to be that way, right? When none of us are perfect, we're all human. And the fact that you're a parent is a gift in and of itself.
Yeah, I love that you are ending with that, because I think the goal of a lot of this is to be more comfortable with our own messiness and our child's messiness, and to be learning along with them can feel tricky, but it also can be really gratifying and amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So just take some pressure off if you can.
Always.
Yes, exactly. Even if you're not a mom and you're listening, take some pressure off yourself.
Take some pressure off. We'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Nurture Network. If this episode resonated with you, subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Share it with a fellow mom who might need it too. Until next time, remember that nurturing yourself is the first step in nurturing your family.